Summer, I'm so excited to have you on my podcast today. You have such an extraordinary story, and I just can't wait for everyone to get to know you. But for those who don't know, can you just give us a little intro on who you are and what you and your family do?
My name is Summer, and first of all, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me on here. I've been a longtime follower and fan of yours, Corinne,
Thank you.
starting out with your fashion and then with all the good you do with your inspirational messages. So anyway, thank you for
Thank
having me.
you.
But I actually, so I live here in Salt Lake City, Utah. I
Mhm.
have four kids, um, and love being a mom, helping them, teaching them. It's brings me my greatest joy. My third child, Jayne, was born with Down syndrome, and it was a surprise diagnosis. And ever since then, we've learned and grown so much as a family, and gained so much experience and knowledge. And I think I want to share that and pass some of the things that we've learned along to others and help others that are new on this journey. So.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm super grateful that you share this because I think it is something that my whole life I've felt this desire to be kind and be inclusive, but sometimes I feel like you don't know what you don't know, and as I've gotten older, I feel like and had friends and also just had this podcast and opportunities to hear from other people and their experiences. I feel like I've gotten better, but I'm always a student, especially when it comes to understanding families and circumstances and things that I don't know. So I'm really excited to learn from you today. So let's start at the beginning if you're okay with it. Tell me more about how you said this was a surprise diagnosis. Like, when did you guys find out?
It was right after she was born.
Okay.
We felt that joy that we all feel when they first place that little baby in your arms, and that relief of,
Yes.
oh my goodness, she's here. And
Yeah.
after all this waiting, she's finally here. And I remember it was a snowy day in December,
Mm.
and all of a sudden, they had taken her over to clean her off, and my husband was videoing, and he just said, "Is she okay?" And I
Mm.
felt this like, oh my goodness, this like heaviness filled the room where there used to be all this joy and just like, oh my goodness, relief and happiness. And all of a sudden this like, what are you talking about? Why are you asking that? Um, and the nurses, technically, I don't think they're supposed to share anything. And so they kind of looked at each other and then they said, oh, she's got long eyelashes. And
Mm.
then they brought her over to me and they laid her on, on my chest. And I looked at her and I thought, she looks just like my other kids. She's beautiful. She's here. Um, and my husband again said, is she okay? Her face looks a little flat. And our my OB came over and we love him. Great. He became, they become a friend to you
Yeah.
when you're in there with them so much. And he sat down and he said, I'm not a pediatrician, but she appears to have some of the characteristics of Down syndrome. And I think right then I just started to cry, because I honestly don't remember a lot after that. I mean, he went on to share a lot of things about how wonderful it was going to be. And she said, he actually said at first, you have a beautiful baby girl. And I'm so grateful that that's how he led. You have a beautiful baby girl, but she appears to have some of those characteristics. And went on to share about a boy that he knew, a teenager that has Down syndrome, and the joy that he brought to everyone around him. And I'm so grateful for that. But I think it was such a shock and so overwhelming that I just cried. And I remember the only thing I said was, did I do something? And
Mm.
I feel so bad looking back that I said that, because in that moment I made it seem like this was a mistake or something that I had done wrong or something that she had done wrong. And she's such a blessing and gift in our life and in our family. And so I'm just so grateful for her. And now I just think, oh my goodness, we're so lucky and blessed to have her in our family. And we've
Yeah.
learned so much since then. She had to be in the NICU for a few days. And when we brought her home, though, she was this sweet, happy, smiley baby. And she's brought us so much joy. So, but that was the beginning of our journey. And
Yeah.
it was hard, for a few months, right? I think I was still in a little bit of denial, um, because I didn't quite know what that would mean for her future or for our family. And you worry, how will people treat her? What will her life be like? Will she be able to do the same things as her other kids? Will she have similar experiences? Will she have friends that really love her? And you worry about all those things as a parent. I mean, we do for all of our kids, but especially
Yeah.
when they have this added diagnosis. Um, but what's been amazing is that throughout the years, and as she continued to grow, I kept thinking, oh my goodness, look at, she's just our baby. Like, first she's just our baby, and she's sweet and she's smiley and she brings so much joy. And my kids, I think they were one of some of our greatest teachers, because they didn't see any difference. It was just, oh, she's my baby sister Jayne.
Yeah.
And they just loved her. And I even remember when Jayne, kids with Down syndrome typically reach those milestones a lot later. And Jayne did take a lot longer to reach all of her milestones.
Mhm.
But I remember we were trying to get her to walk, and I think the average is a year old for most typical children. And, Jayne was 2 years old and still not walking. And I think she was about 27 months, and she finally started walking. I remember my cute older daughter, she was darling from day one, always trying to help her with like flashcards she'd make and helping her to learn her letters and colors and trying to get her to walk. And I remember I had this her first video of Jane walking, and my daughter in the background is saying, Mom, look, she's walking. We thought it was going to take her a long time, but look, she's walking. And it
Oh,
was it was so cute. It was like, oh my goodness, why do we put these limits and these things on all of our, on everyone, on our kids, on ourselves? And I thought to my sweet Elle, she did, this was not a long time. This was just when Jane was supposed to walk.
yeah. It was
This
perfect
was at
timing to her.
Jane's pace. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
perfect for her. And so she, my kids have taught me so, so much, all of them. And I feel like it's been a blessing for all of us. But I'm just so grateful for all those things that we've learned. But
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said a minute ago where you talked about how important it was that your doctor used such like gentle and beautiful words in that moment. And, how words, I think about this a lot, how words matter. And, that you said it meant so much that he started with, you have a beautiful baby girl. And so I'm just curious, like, as this journey has unfolded, you know, how has that played a part for you as far as like, people using words that matter and what you guys have learned and what you teach others and, just anything in that realm.
I couldn't agree with you more. Words definitely matter. And I think the more life I live, the more I realize, oh my goodness, it's so important, the words that we choose.
Mhm.
And yes, that moment where he led with the positive and led with Jane as a child of God, as an individual, and not as a diagnosis is so important. And I'd say that is one thing that I've learned, is that, and it's not meant to be in an unkind way. It's just people are still learning. We're all still learning. But people will often refer to kids that have special needs, oh, that Downs girl, or that autistic child, and I think it's so important to use person first language, and instead say, oh, that girl with Down syndrome, or that boy who has autism, or that child who has spina bifida. I mean, instead of calling them by a diagnosis, because
Right.
we are people first. And I
Hmm.
think we all want to be known for who we are, for our own personal strengths, and not for something that is something that we have. And Jane has
Yeah.
Down syndrome, and you know what? She's proud of it. She knows
Mhm.
it. But I don't want Jane to think that's who she is, because
Yeah.
Jane is a child of God, and she has very unique talents and abilities to any other child that has Down syndrome, just like all my kids. So I think that's
Yeah.
really important. And just being kind. Um, I think it's so important to always address people, and a child first. I
Mm.
know one of the things people have asked me is, as far as inclusion goes, one of the best things we can do is address the child instead of going to a parent, oh, what's their name, or what do they like to do, or oh, talk to the child, talk to them.
Mm.
And in some cases, obviously, if the child's nonverbal, then yes, the parent can step in and say, oh, you know what, their name is this, and but it's so important to actually see them as an individual
Yeah.
and talk to them. Oh, and give them questions that are easy, for them to answer, obviously. Oh, I love your dress, or, what's your name, or how old are you? But to acknowledge them as an individual and as a person, I think is so important too. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Can you tell me about a time where that, like where Jayne had a really positive person or interaction where she really felt seen? You probably have lots of examples, but anything that comes to mind?
you know what? I would say one of my favorite experiences I still go back to. Jayne has luckily had a very positive school experience in
Mm,
general, and interactions with her peers have been, in general, very positive. Um, she was always in a typical preschool.
mm.
We wanted her, she had the state early intervention preschool, but then on the opposite days, we always did a typical preschool, the same one that my other kids did, just to
Okay.
give her more of that social interaction. But then it was a natural step for her to go ahead and continue on to our neighborhood school with my son.
Mhm.
And from that time, those kids in her first grade class were so good to her. And I think kids are naturally really good at that.
Yes.
They are so good at just seeing the person and the individual. Oh my goodness, you have brown hair. Oh, you have brown eyes like me. Or, what I mean? Oh my goodness, we like to play on the bars together.
Mhm.
Um, they're so good at that. And so they've always been the first ones to just talk to Jayne. Oh, hi, what's your name?
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's as we get older that we start to see differences more.
Yeah.
And in some ways, we kind of pull away because of differences, where I'm like, our differences are amazing and we should celebrate them and they make us unique and special. But I think I mean, we can learn so much from our children who don't see that, right? They just
Mhm.
are like, oh my goodness, look, they're having fun over there. I'm going to go play. What's your name?
Yeah.
And so kids have always been really good, where Jayne had these cute three little boys in first grade that just took her under their wing and all wanted to be her Valentine. And
That's
they
so
told them
cute.
all no, and they were heartbroken. And she probably didn't understand what they were saying, what,
Yeah.
but they invited her over, and I just think we learn so much from them and how they've treated Jayne. So
Oh, I love that. It's heartwarming to hear that. And I also just really, I always hope, like I teach my kids that, but I don't go to school with them. So I always hope that they act the way that I've tried to teach them to act with people who are a little bit different with, than them in any way. Like you're saying, different hair, different skin color, different family background, different whatever. And so I am always curious what you would tell other parents like about teaching your children like with inclusivity. And I know you just said like kids are just naturally good at that. And I think that's true. And I think kids also can just they're just so honest. And
mhm.
sometimes that can be like, oh, don't say it that way. You know what I mean? So, yeah, how do you, I mean, I still remember my parents just being absolutely mortified when I was a little girl and being like, Daddy, why is that lady fat? And my dad's just like, oh my gosh, but I just was so young and honest and didn't understand.
Yeah.
So, yeah, how do you tell parents that they should teach their children about being inclusive and the right things to say?
I would just say to find common ground.
Mm,
I think, like I said, yes, we want to celebrate our differences, but I think if you can find common ground, and I think it goes back also to the old saying of, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. And
yes.
so I'm constantly trying to reinforce to my kids, yes, you may think that, or that might, but we never say anything that's going to hurt someone or be unkind. We always, and I always have had my own little saying that I tell my kids too. If you think something nice, say it.
I
Doesn't
love
matter
that.
what it is. And I've always
Yeah.
thought that, like, even to a stranger, oh my goodness, I love your shoes. I love your shirt. Like, you will never regret being kind. You'll never regret saying something kind. And you could just make someone's whole day or turn their whole day around by just saying something very simple at the grocery store of oh, wow, I love your shirt, you know? And that sounds so simple and maybe shallow, but at the same time, I'm like, no, I think being complimented and having someone notice you for anything makes a difference. And so I always tell my kids that if you think something nice, say it.
Yeah.
And also don't ever let anyone sit alone. Like I think it's so easy, especially middle school and high school ages, right? For we're so concerned about our kids are concerned about fitting in themselves. I mean, it's
Yes.
scary, it's hard. There's always those leaders that pull kids away, and you don't want to be on the outs, and it's hard. But I think if we can have the courage to go sit by that person who's sitting alone or invite them to come over, it not only will make their day, but it will also, other kids might follow you, which I think is really important. Um, there was a cute little girl when Jayne was in third grade, and it was kind of her first friend that was a girl, because before that, it was all these little boys that were so cute to her and would invite her over. And this
Yeah.
girl, um, she asked if Jayne could play one day, and it's as a parent of a child with special needs, I always am like, oh my goodness, I always want them to come to my house first, because
Yeah.
I just don't know, and I don't know if they know how to interact with Jayne. And so she came over, and she was darling, and they played games, and they did, squirt guns, and they jumped on the trampoline. And when I asked her, later as they became closer friends, and they're still really good friends to this day,
Yeah.
I asked her, I said, well, what made you reach out to Jayne? And she said, honestly, we just played on the bars together.
Oh,
And so that's why I always say, like, just find that common ground
yeah.
and realize that, yes, we're going to have differences, but I know we all have things in common too. And I think one of the things we all have in common is that we all want to be treated with kindness, and
Hmm.
we all want to be included, and
Yeah.
we all want to feel loved.
Yeah.
And that's something I think even as adults, we're still struggling with,
Yes.
because we get in our own comfort zones. And I think it's so important to reach out and include others. And, it's interesting. My cute Jayne, she's still teaching me all the time, because she just doesn't have a filter, which can, sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe don't say that. But,
Yeah.
but she is very honest. And it was sweet. I went to pick her up one day from carpool in front of the high school. And as I'm pulling up, I could see her sitting there on the wall. And then as I got closer, because there's a line, I see her get up from the wall, walk over, go, and she went and sat down by this girl sitting by herself. And then I saw her talk to her. And then as I pulled up, she looked up and saw me, and she waved goodbye and came to the car. And I said, oh, Jayne, who is that girl? Did you know her? And she goes, no, I just saw her sitting alone. And so I wanted to say hi and see if she was okay. And I said, oh,
Oh,
what did she say? And she said, oh, she just said she was waiting for her ride, which I'm sure so many kids are just sitting there waiting for their ride. And she probably was not needing someone to sit by her. But I thought it was so sweet that Jayne noticed, oh, this girl's sitting alone. I'm going to go sit by her.
yeah.
And such a lesson to me. And then I said, okay, well, how was lunch? And it's the beginning of school. And unfortunately, Jayne's friends from middle school are not in her same lunch periods. So
Okay.
that's been a little bit hard, right? Starting high school. Um, and I said, well, who did you sit with at lunch today? Did you have any friends? And she said, oh, I sat by myself. And I said, Jayne, I said, you can go. And immediately in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I don't want her to be alone.
Yeah.
I'm like, and I said, you can go find anyone to go sit by. I'm sure that people would all want to be your friend if you just go sit by them. And she said, Mom, I wasn't alone. I always have Jesus. And I said,
Oh,
oh, you're right. You're right. But I love that she wants to help others. She doesn't want others to be alone,
yeah.
but she's okay knowing that she always has him with her at all times. And then I just said, that is so awesome. I said, you know what? You can share his light by
Mhm.
going and talking to others too. So anyway, so I would say just reaching out, having the courage to reach out and be a friend, and help others, right? It takes a lot of
Yeah.
courage for our kids, but I think little by little, or even smiling at someone or waving in the hallway, those little things that I think it will slowly get more and more comfortable for people. So
Yeah. That's such good advice. And I've, been in I just was released, but I used to be in a position in our church congregation where I worked with the teenage girls, and I was constantly trying to talk to them about this, about like there's usually going to be like a one person that is left out. And some of them are really honest with me talking about what you just said, like, well, I don't want to be, if I hang out with the wrong people, then I might get excluded from the in crowd, or the other popular girls might not want to be friends with me if I'm friends with someone else. And so I don't know that it ever sunk in or made a difference, but what I tried to teach them was like, you show that so much confidence by not being afraid of, who you're friends with. It shows other people that if you're totally confident in being kind to others, including, then you kind of turn into an instant leader. And anyway, so I think what you're saying, it
So
is so powerful for kids to realize that it's like including others is a superpower. It doesn't take you down a level, it puts you up a level as far as like your confidence of I choose who I'm friends with. I don't let other people dictate that for me.
I love that. I love that you called it a superpower because I think it's true. And I think you gain confidence every time you do it.
Yeah.
And then I always think you will never ever regret being kind. There are
Yeah.
things I regret about my high school experience where I'm like, oh, I wish I'd gone and reached out to that person, or I wish I hadn't been so shy and I had, but you'll never regret being kind,
Yeah.
right? That's anyway, which I think is so awesome. So,
Yeah. And I'm always trying to teach my kids too, like, you want friends who are a little bit different than you. It's super boring to be friends with
yeah,
all the same people that are all just trying to copy each other and be the same,
so true.
And that, like, some of my very greatest friendships have come from those unexpected, people that cross your path and you become close with, that probably you wouldn't have sought out, all on your own, but those end up being like the best friendships. But it's also like kids in middle school, it doesn't matter where you are. They're all kind of going through that same phase of who am I? Where do I fit in? How do
Mhm.
I fit in? So, and you've talked about recently about how Jayne is kind of in that like adolescent phase, right? So
Mhm.
she just started high school. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. So she's a freshman in high
Yeah.
school.
And so I wanted to know just you've talked a little bit about faith, and you just barely mentioned that she said that Jesus is always with her, but how has faith played a part in all of this, and especially like right now where she's going through a transition?
Honestly, oh, so sorry.
It's fine.
Um, she Jayne has always had this incredible connection to Jesus
Mm.
since the time she was little. And she would love to sing the songs, and she would say the most profound things that I thought, oh my goodness. And I still remember, and I'm trying to think how old she was, maybe 9 or 10. And I was, doing her hair in my bathroom mirror and brushing her hair. And she was looking in the mirror and she goes, Mom, what's in my eyes? I'm like, and I looked in her eyes. I'm like, I don't see anything in your eyes. And she goes, no, Mom, what's in my eyes? And I was like, and I looked at her and I said, Jayne, I don't see anything in yours. I just see your pretty brown eyes. And she said, oh, I know. I have Jesus eyes. It's Heavenly Father in my eyes. And then she just walked
Oh,
away. And I thought, oh my goodness. Like, how cool is that? That,
yes.
so for her, she sees the light in her eyes. And I think, I know every one of us has that light within us.
Yeah.
And that the song, His Image in Your Countenance. And I think it's really cool that she sees that
Mhm.
she, and it wasn't even a big deal. It's like, oh yeah, and then just walks out.
Mhm.
So it just comes so naturally for her. And all the time, she loves to dance and loves to perform on stage. And so she's had the opportunity to dance at competitions and do solos, with her dance studio. And it's been really cool. Multiple times I've said, Jayne, so how was it? And she goes, Mom, I was so nervous. But
Oh,
when I was on stage, I felt Jesus beside me, and he told me, you can do it, Jayne. And she just has so many things where she's like, oh, he's always just with me.
yeah.
And I love that it's given her strength and courage. And she loves to read her scriptures and learn about Jesus. And she will be in there marking verses and highlighting and writing notes and things. And I just think, wow, like I need to be better. I need to follow her example more, um, and have that same connection. We have this amazing sculptural garden here in Utah. Then it has I think it's called the Light of Christ. I'm trying to remember. Anyway, but it has different sculptures of different scenes of Christ's life. And we went there this last spring. And Jayne, as we're walking around, we got to the one where Jesus is walking on the water. And Jayne runs up and she goes, Mom, look. And I said, oh, who is it? And, and she goes, it's my best friend. And, and I said, oh my goodness, he is. You're right. He is your best friend. And so I love that she just sees Jesus as just like any one of us. I mean, she knows that he's our savior, but she doesn't see him as this distant, hard to connect with, person. She loves Jesus. She loves Heavenly Father, and she sees him as her friend, and she talks to him as a friend, and she feels him by her all the time, which I think is really cool. And it's such a lesson and example to me. So I love that. It's helped our whole family when she says these sweet little profound things that are just like no big deal. Just, oh yeah, I feel Jesus. And it's an example to all of us of how I feel like we all know, as a family, we're very religious, and we talk about Jesus a lot and we love him. But I think we're all striving, myself included, to have a more personal relationship with him. And I love that for Jayne, it's always been there, and it's just very natural for her. So
Yeah, that's beautiful. I've never felt inspired or prompted to say this in any of my hundreds of podcast episodes, but I just want to say that if you're listening to this and you are feeling like a really warm feeling in your heart when Summer's talking, that is the spirit testifying of truth that all of this is true. I just want to say that because I'm just feeling that over and over with everything that you share. I'm just like, oh, that's truth. Oh, it feels so good. It's so right for you to be sharing these things because they're true. And because these are the most plain and precious, simple truths of life is that we're children of our Heavenly Father, and that Jayne just sees those things clearer than probably the average person. And that's just so beautiful. And I'm super grateful that you're sharing all of this. It's
oh, thank
it's such
you.
a gift for me to just feel that and experience that. So I just wanted to point that out for anyone who's listening and oh, why do I feel so good? That's why. Okay, I wanted to ask you about, I love that you have a Millie because I have a Millie
Oh,
too.
you do.
And
I love it. Yeah.
yes, my happiest child of my five is Millie. She was just born happy. She's happy all the time. And so I loved this Instagram post that you put up recently. You said, if you want to know how to treat someone with special needs, look at their siblings. And so, can you tell me about that relationship that Jayne and Millie have and what you've observed with the two of them?
Oh my goodness. I love that you say that your Millie is your happiest child, because when my Millie was born, I've always called her my sunshine
Oh,
because she is my happy child. So,
yeah.
and all my kids are amazing and happy, but Millie's always had this little just happy-go-lucky personality.
Yep.
Um, Honestly, their relationship has been the sweetest thing to watch and see as it develops and grows. Since Millie was born, Jayne has obviously loved being a big sister and loving on her and taking and being the mom for, when she was younger. But then I really felt like from the time Millie was 2 years old on up, that I almost had twins, even though Jayne was 3.5 years older. But Millie was able to speak earlier and everything. And so they were just my little twins running around doing everything together, always wanted to match together and wear the same
Mhm.
clothes and do the same things and pack the same bags full of all kinds of treasures. But, and I still remember when Jayne was little and Millie would nap and Jayne always wanted to play with her. And so I'd have to lock Millie's bedroom door so Jayne couldn't wake her up before she was done napping. And one time I was doing laundry or something, and all of a sudden I'm like, where did Jayne go? And we go into Millie's, go up to Millie's room, and I thought Jayne was in her room playing. She had gotten a fork, unlocked Millie's bedroom door, climbed into Millie's crib, taken my phone. Because obviously I'm glad I didn't have to have my phone by me every second back then, but maybe I should have. and was playing the song Let It Go, and had like a blanket around her, and like they were Anna and Elsa with capes, and just like singing their little hearts out. Like they have always been the best of friends. But and I love that they always had each other and got to play together, and they did dance classes together and gymnastics, and I mean everything. They were just inseparable. But as they've grown, I love that Jayne was still able to be the big sister. And Jayne is the one who taught Millie how to tie her shoes, even though Jayne was still kind of figuring it out herself, but she showed her how to do it. And Millie looked up to Jayne. and looked to Jayne for help and wanted Jayne to come with her to dance to make her feel comfortable and to help her to feel like, like she had a buddy and a big sister there. And I love that Millie still got to have Jayne as her big sister too. But then as Millie continued to progress, Millie
Mhm.
started to develop a little bit, in like her academic skills more than Jayne.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Millie was reading a little bit, at a higher level than Jayne was. And so it's been fun to see how they transitioned from Jayne still the big sister, and Millie still looks to her for comfort and guidance and like, oh my goodness, I need someone there and let's do this. But now Millie gets to also kind of take on that role in a way, and she can look out for Jayne too and say, hey mom, we're doing this. Is it okay if Jayne does this? And now when we leave them alone, I'm like, hey Millie, you guys can make food together, but like, I want Millie helps to take care of Jayne and watch out for her, which I think has been really, really cool. Um, and just seeing how she kind of takes care of her too. And I love that they've been able to have both of those roles and help each other. And
Yeah.
to this day, yes, Millie developmentally is probably at a higher level than Jayne in a lot of ways. But she still looks to her as her big sister, which I think is awesome. And I hope that
Yeah.
she always, always does.
Yeah.
It's been a really sweet relationship to see. So I love that for her and for both of them. But
Oh, I love that. And when you gave that advice, like if you want to know how to treat someone who has special needs, look at their siblings, what did you mean exactly by that?
You know, honestly, and it goes back to what I said about my older daughter and my son as well. They don't see Jayne as, oh, Jayne as someone who has Down syndrome. Yes, Jayne has Down syndrome, but they just see Jayne as Jayne. They
Mm.
just see Jayne as their little sister or their big sister who, honestly, she's really sweet, but she's really sassy. and and she has this like stubborn streak, and she just will, like my son and her, they have a very typical looking brother sister relationship where he teases her nonstop and she will roll her eyes and oh my goodness, and so I love that they treat her like anyone else.
Yeah.
Yes, there's grace. They give her more empathy and they give her a little more understanding when she makes mistakes or can't, or doesn't quite understand things. And I love that there's compassion and grace for her, knowing that things do take longer and are harder for her. But for the most part, they treat her just like everybody else.
Yeah.
Easton treats Jayne the same way he treats Millie. Elle treats Jayne the same way she does Millie. They just treat her as their little sister. And I think because of that, Jayne has learned how to interact in a very healthy way where it helps her to interact with other people in that same way as well. They don't
Yeah.
baby her. Um, they go to her level and help her to do things, and they help her when she needs help. But I think if we they treat her like they would any other sibling, which I
Yeah.
love. You know,
Yeah.
there is empathy, yes, but they treat her just like any other sibling. So
That's just really good to hear and good advice too, as far as like how can you have a good relationship with someone who has Down syndrome or another special need. Is there anything that you've learned in like the community of special need moms where I know you've talked sometimes about neurodivergent, am I saying that right? And neurotypical children, and that there's differences. So are there things that you've learned from your maybe friends or people that you know in that community who don't have a child who maybe is mainstreamed as easily, or I mean, I don't know if you feel comfortable like if you're speaking on their behalf or whatever, but just being like a mom who has probably more experience in that world, is there anything that you would want to pass on or share?
yeah, and are you saying as far as inclusion goes and interacting with
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, because I think your advice that you just gave is, so good for someone like Jayne probably, but then I'm just wondering too, where you gave that example earlier where maybe the parent does need to step in because a child is nonverbal, or, if there's anything like that that you're like, okay, and here's how to apply that for maybe a child whose challenges look this way, or I
Mhm.
don't know. I'm always like, I don't ever want to use the wrong
No,
terms,
you're great.
but
Yeah. Yes. No, honestly, I think that's where and obviously my experience is with Jayne, and Jayne is
Yeah.
unique, and every child is unique in their different challenges and things that they're and strengths. Um, but I would say, just in talking to other moms, I think the most important thing is to still look at that child as an individual, look for their individual strengths
Mhm.
and talents and abilities, and help those things come out and shine. And then also know where they have more struggles or challenges or weaknesses and help them with those. We always say inclusion is so, so important, I think, for all children. I
Mhm.
think no matter what the diagnosis is, or how capable the child is, or what their struggles are or challenges are, I think being included in some way is important for all children. It looks different, though, for all children, depending on their needs. And so for Jayne, it has worked for her to be in the mainstream classrooms at times
Mhm.
and to be included in some of those typical classrooms. She loves learning and making lists and reading and all those things. So for her, she loves school. But for a child who maybe doesn't naturally love school, or has a harder time in communicating or writing things down or whatever it may be, I think there's still a way to include them, but in a way that's comfortable and works for them and their needs. And
Mhm.
maybe that's through just getting together with other families in the community that have children with special needs, because, like I said, their siblings will be the best helpers and advocates because they get it, right?
Yeah.
They've been around it and they know. Or maybe it's through their most areas have unified sports, which is the most incredible program where peers come in and they help kids that have different needs be able to participate in different activities, and they're there to help and they want to help, and so they get it as well, and they want to do what they can to make a good experience for this child, whether it's, you know if they're in a wheelchair, or if they need to have headphones to help with sound and different sensory things. I think there's always ways to include our children and to get them involved, but looking at their individual needs. But also, I think it's so important to focus on their strengths. There's this sweet boy, and I love his mom as well, but he's in Jayne's class, and he's in a wheelchair, and he is the most darling boy, always has a smile on his face. And we were actually at homecoming the other night, and he was talking to me and telling me about an experience he had with two of his friends on stage at the school doing a performance. And he just kept going on and on. I am so proud of my friends. They did so awesome. I am so proud of them. They were dancing on stage and they did so awesome. And I just thought, oh my goodness, this boy has this incredible talent for cheering people on,
Yeah.
for being positive, for like being like the best hype man you could ever be for his friends. And I
Yeah.
think that's a talent. That is, we talk about sharing our extra and sharing our light. That is his extra. Like, he is a sweet boy. And every time I see him, asks about my cute son that is on a mission for our church, and talks about how much he loves him. And I think we need to, instead of looking at a child for what their diagnosis is, we need to look at them for who they are as a person and what their talent is, what their strength is. And maybe even if they're nonverbal, honestly, there are some kids that you just walk in a room and their eyes light up and they've changed your day. And they don't even have to say a word.
Yeah.
Just being around them is a gift and a blessing. And I think if we focus on those things, I think we'll come away as better people, and we'll be able to help more people just by not looking so much at the struggle, right? And the struggle is so hard for so many people. And I think we don't know that, because we're not in, everyone's in their own situation. But I just think if we look for everyone's extra and the things that they have to share with the world and their light, I think that's how we come together. That's how we be more inclusive. And I think anyone who's around that, I mean, these teenagers that are involved in those unified sports programs, and that are, we call them peer tutors in our high school, and that come into the special ed classroom and help those kids, you can see it in their eyes. They come away better people. They come away having learned so much. And I promise they'll never forget that experience. And I
Yeah.
promise they will never not love those kids. They will never not be drawn to to people that have different needs. And it
Mhm.
opens their eyes more to other people and their needs that they have. And then they're more likely to go up to others they see out in public and say, oh my goodness, tell me about your job, or where do you live, or what do you like to do? And I think that's what I would say, is that although every child's different, and I know I parent Jayne, so I know how to help Jayne, I
Yeah.
think we can still focus on what each individual child's strength is and still try to include them and help them to shine their light. So
Yeah. That's a beautiful answer. And I remember having experiences like that too in high school and how they totally changed who I was. And I think it's helped me as a mom too to try to teach my kids, how much joy you can have just getting outside of yourself and not just, but to see others in the way that God sees them and to like how much joy there is in, being of not just of service. I don't know. It always to me feels like you get way more back than you're giving in those situations. But
yeah, I,
um
I actually would say that I think inclusion, I've always said, is such a powerful thing, and it's such a It's been the most incredible blessing for Jayne to have her form these friendships and being included in the classroom, the typical classrooms, and to have friendships both with typical kids and with kids that have different needs and special needs like her. But I think even more so, inclusion is a blessing for those typical kids,
yes.
because they learn so much and they grow so much and they realize, oh my goodness, look at this amazing world that we get to be a part of now.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's pretty awesome.
I have a question for you that keeps popping into my mind, and I wasn't planning on asking this, but I just can't push it away again. So, what has Jayne taught you about the atonement of Jesus Christ?
Oh wow. Honestly, probably just that there is so much love. There's so much love and understanding, and that I don't even think we can fully understand, that our Savior has for us. I think I know that he covers all of it. And I'm so grateful that Jayne has taught me to look honestly at the individual, to come closer to our Savior, to have that connection with him. Um, and honestly, to really, yeah, to look at the person, to find the good in people, to look for their light, and to find, like, the Savior is with all of us. He's there for all of us. And I love that she's helped me to feel his love more. There have been some really, I mean, as much as she's been such a blessing for our family, but there have been some really, really hard moments too. Trying to navigate different things with friends and inclusion and different things. And I've had to come to rely on our Savior a lot more, because there are things that are personal that not everybody understands, or that my husband and I have to work through. And I think it's been so awesome to know that I have our Savior, that he's there, that he understands those feelings that we feel, that he knows how to help us and how to help Jayne feel comforted and helped as well as she navigates all these hard things. So that's what I would say, is just his immense love that I think we have no way to fully understand at this, in our human capacity. So
Right, right. Yes. I love that answer. And just I'm feeling that same like warm feeling of just testifying of truth. That's so good. Okay. Tell me about your book because you guys are about to release a book, right? It's on
yeah,
pre-order. Yes.
yeah.
Tell me about it.
The book came about. I think I've always loved writing, and I've always loved children's books. I mentioned before, one of my favorite things when my kids were little was to go to the library and get stacks of books and then come home and sit on the couch and read through them all. And I've always loved picture books because I think they really do, they tell the sweetest little stories and they have the best messages that I think we can all learn from. I think really, like, and I've mentioned this before too, but kids teach us so much. And I
Yes.
feel like those basic messages on how to treat people and how to be kind and loving are found in those books. And so I've always loved them. And when my oldest daughter was younger, I started writing. And then when Jayne came along, I started to realize, oh my goodness, I was so nervous. I was so scared and overwhelmed when she was born. And I thought, oh my goodness, our life will never be the same and our family won't be the same. And how can we do all these things we planned? And our plan is her life's going to be so different and it's going to affect our whole family. And I thought that was going to be such a hard thing. And yes, there have been, like I mentioned, hard things along the way. But I also learned that sometimes the plan that we have for our life and what we think is supposed to happen or should happen is not always the best path. And
Right.
Heavenly Father has greater plans and ideas for us that are so much better than we could ever even fathom or realize. And so what I thought would be this horrible challenge and struggle for our whole family has turned into be the most incredible blessing for our family. And every child has struggles and every child has challenges. And when Jayne was little and began to grow, I started to think, oh my goodness, look at this. Yes, she has Down syndrome, but she's our little girl. And look, she's doing this. And look how cute this is. And look at this little gift that she has of always knowing when someone needs help or always
Yeah.
knowing when someone needs a hug, even when it's a stranger at the store,
Hmm.
or, leaving these cute little notes for us, or just this innate ability that she has to find the joy and the wonder in every little thing. One of my very favorite quotes is, enjoy the small things, for one day you'll look back and realize they're the big things. And I stand by that to this day because I look back on my children. I have a 21-year-old now, and my favorite moments are those little small things of playing in the backyard or playing a game around the table. And we've done some fun adventures and vacations, which are also wonderful. And those are wonderful things too. But even on vacations, my husband and I say our favorite times are having all three meals together as a family.
Yeah,
Because that's hard to do.
it is. It is. Yeah.
But so I think that was kind of the inspiration behind the book was, okay, yes, there are some things. Jayne has Down syndrome, but I don't want to focus on her diagnosis. I want to focus on all the amazing gifts and talents and blessings that she has in her light and how she can share that and all of her extra. And Jayne brought so much extra joy and extra wonder into our lives and extra excitement over the little things. And that's what I want to focus on. And I love that my hope is that through this book, this is a book that you don't even know that Jayne has Down syndrome until the very last page.
Oh,
And I want it to be something where kids will read this book and think, oh my goodness, I like to do that. Oh, or my little sister did that. Or I love to do that. Or that's just like me. And then at the end of the book, realize, oh, wait, Jayne has Down syndrome. And think, oh my goodness, we have a lot more in common than I realized. And maybe the next time they see someone with Down syndrome or with any special needs, they'll be more likely to walk up and say, hi, my name's so and so, or how are you? Or do you like to do this? Or I just think if we, like I said before, if we can focus on finding that common ground and knowing that it's our extra that makes us special and unique, which is awesome, but we still have a lot of things in common too. And if we can see that, then we can, establish more relationships and friendships. And I just think that's probably my biggest message is to help everyone, no matter who they are, be able to share their light and their talents or their extra. And then find that common ground and be a friend to everybody. And that's my hope for the book is that more kids will be able to see that and reach out. And the reason why it's called A Little Extra Jayne, I should mention, is because children with Down syndrome have one extra copy of the 21st chromosome. So they have one extra chromosome. And that's why my Jayne's Instagram account that I run for her to advocate is called A Little Extra Jayne, because she does have an extra chromosome, but I think there's so much more extra that she has that she shares with our family and friends and everyone around her. So,
it's so beautiful. I really love that. I love that you guys made, that you wrote this book and that I can't wait to read that to my kids too. And I think they'll have that same reaction. Yeah. So if there's one message, Summer, that you want people to remember from this podcast episode, what do you want that one message to be?
oh, just to reach out to others, to be kind, to be inclusive, to have the courage to be a friend to other people, um, to help other people share their light and to find their extra to share. And to like see the beauty and magic in the world that I'm so grateful that Jayne has helped me to see. Anyway, that would be my message, just to share with the world that we all have so many different talents and abilities and things, and to help people share their extra. So
I love that. Where can people find you guys and where can they pre-order your book?
oh, you're so sweet. A little extra Jayne on Instagram, and there's underscores between every word. So a little extra Jayne. And then you can pre-order the book on a littleextrajayne.com or jumelpress.com. So
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much again, Summer. It was such a delight to have you on today.
oh, well, thank you for having me. It was so fun to visit with you and get to know you better. So thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to Mint Arrow Messages. We're so grateful that you spent time with us today. Make sure you go follow us at Corinne Stocco or at Mint Arrow Messages on Instagram. And then if you have a second and you love the show, I would love it so much if you'd leave a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts. That's the only way people can find out about us if they haven't heard about us before. So just go tap the stars, leave a rating or a review. If you have a second, we would appreciate it so much.